I will turn it over to you. I'll mute myself so you can get started.
All right, my name is Hannah Willett. I work for Stephen Gould, and today I'm going to present passing parameters from the URL into your application. And what I mean by that is this ugly string. You'll see that the base of this is just the website up here, but I've got these key fields where I've got, you gotta excuse me, I've been getting over a cold, so I'm rather congested. So I've got these key fields with the part number, some dates and stuff like that. When I pop this into my browser, it automatically pulls in the information to here and filters my dashboard down. Pretty neat. Let's see how we do this. It's actually fairly easy. So I've already got the dashboard built. I'm not going to go into this. It's just a dashboard. It's pretty simplistic. You guys know how to do that. I will go into adding it into the main menu though. Where do I want to put this? Stats dashboards, throw it at the bottom. Whatever my sequence was. And we're just going to search for my dashboard, which happens to be part trans. And we're going to save that and open up a new tab to make sure that it comes up. Look at that. So the first thing you'll notice, which is bad, is you see this thing opens automatically. I'm going to stop that so it stops loading. This is an unrestricted part transaction table. That's no bueno. So let's go into Application Studio and fix that before we start doing anything else. Hey, look, a time trial. Oops. Don't do that. All right, so if we come into the main tab here and we click the grid and go to the properties, under advanced, this expand at runtime is checked by default. And that works for a lot of things, but in the instance of a dashboard like this where you're pulling an unfiltered list of parts, if you've got hundreds of thousands of transactions, you can see where that would get messy. So we're just going to come in here and uncheck that for now. And then I'm going to apply this layer I made to my home screen after I publish it, of course. Should put something useful there. I'm not going to. All right, so this is the setup for the menu. Added the dashboard, added the customization. I don't need this anymore. All right, so the key to making this work, pun intended, is this data view. It has to be called key fields. Anything else does not work. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add this data view. And I'm going to do it manually. We're going to call this key fields. This is technically all you need. You don't need any data set because you're not pulling from the system database. This is our own custom-made data view, so this is what we're going to use. I'm going to add in some columns here because I like the IntelliSense, but that is not strictly necessary. Tim, you got to fix this. When I tab out of this, it disappears.
I'm sorry. Great ideas.
I'm going to hurt you. So the idea of this dashboard, the idea of this dashboard and what it's doing is it's taking these Zulu dates and the string from the URL, it's passing it to a function, converting it to the local date and local time, and then it's giving a visual of that local time. So I'm using the integer value because that's what the parttran table uses, but that doesn't make much sense to my users, which is why I have this demonstration read-only visual for them. This is the super exciting part. There are bound to be errors here, by the way. This is a truly live demo. I did test it to make sure that the process works, but this is all from scratch because I'm apparently a masochist. And we've got our fields. And again, you don't need to add these. This is because I like IntelliSense later on. It's easier than trying to type it out and remember what the key field names were. So now that we've got these, we're going to add the top panel section so that we have something to filter off of. Give it a pretty name, parameters. And we need a column to place it in, place other controls in. The panel itself only takes a few controls. One of them is this column one. For aesthetic reasons, I like to give it 4 to 6 columns. That packs them together a lot nicer, so you don't have all that white space. And then we got to add all of our fields. So we've got the Zulu date start, Zulu date end, part number. We've got the start date, the end date. Start time, the end time. Oops. And the local time read-only ones. So let's make these a little more useful. That doesn't do much for your users when they're reading ERP text box 1. And again, this is going to be from the URL. We need a data binding. So there's key fields. I hit dot, I've got IntelliSense. That's because I added those to the data view. And dates Zulu. This one is from the URL as well. Part number. And this is the last one from the URL. The rest of these are going to be populated by a function. I've got that function pre-made here. All it's really doing is taking in a Zulu string. It's converting that to my local time zone, which would be Central Standard Time. And then it's outputting a date time, a time integer, and a time string. This is from the function. Key field start date. And date local from the function. There's an end date. So if you're good about development, you'd be changing these up here so that there's something a little more useful than ERP numeric box 58333. I'm not going to do that, but you should. Do as I say, not as I do. And time from the function. So much nicer with IntelliSense. I don't have to guess. You can see me guessing later. Some of it doesn't always have IntelliSense. Oh, I forgot those fields. See? Told you something would come up. Okay. Oh my gosh. Don't tab here, folks.
Did you tell Brian about that?
I did not. The habit is strong too, to tab there. Like it happened so often when I was creating this. I'm like,
It's one of those
There we
things where, one person does it and they'll do it 100 times the right way and they'll never hit the problem. And then another person comes in and they do something and it's like, well, what'd you do that for?
completely.
We never did that. We never had that problem.
So again, if you guys remember, I made these read only. That is a property down in the state. Check this box, and now your users can't modify that. I'm leaving these ones open, even though these are controlled by a function based off this. I'd still like my users to be able to enter their own parameters if they need to or want to. All right, so now we've got our parameter set. I'm going to preview this, and you're going to notice these are all grayed out. Why is that? Because if we open up DevTools here, go to the console and turn on debugging. Debugging is turned on by hitting Control, Alt, and 8. And if you type Control, Alt, and V as in Victor, you get your data views. If you look up key fields here, you can see there's nothing in there. This has not been initialized, and without it being initialized, you cannot enter data. So let's initialize that. We're going to create some events to put some null values in. The first one I like to do is an onload event, and the trigger is going to be, as you guessed it, onload. Form onload. This event comes stock with, I'd say 95% of the screens that you'll be using. If you're making a custom app, this will not be here, in which case you would go down to Window, Onload. It's the same thing. I'm just hooking into the native one that Epicore's got for us. And I'm not going to put anything specific in the onload. Typically, when I'm creating customizations, this gets used a lot. So my name gets a little different if I'm initializing fields and executing BAQs. So I leave it pretty standard, and I like to use the event next widget to call more specific events. We're going to call this one init fields. A habit I've gotten into, because I've been burned a lot by this, is to only have one event open at a time. I've experienced it where if you've got multiple and you're saving, it corrupts data in the other one. I can't reproduce it. Brian can't reproduce it. It's a gremlin. It still exists. I still found it in 2023.2. So this is going to be a no trigger event. The reason being is because there's no specific trigger on the form that needs to be called for this to execute. I'm calling it specifically from the form onload. It's just piggybacking on that one. So I'm going to leave that empty. And I'm going to use the row update widget to set all of these gray fields to their associated initialized value. So end date is going to end up as null. Key fields, and Zulu is a string, so this is going to be open quotes, double quotes. And time is a number. Local end time is a string. And then rinse and repeats for the start. Variations. And the part number. Don't forget that guy. Start date is null. The Zulu is a string. And the time is a number. All right, so now we've got our event that calls onload and initializes these fields. Have I done everything correctly? These should all be white and editable when I preview this now. I did it. These ones, you notice, are still gray. Don't forget that I made those read only on purpose. That's fine. That's a good thing. So if we enable debugging and open up our data views, you can see that key fields is red. That means it's dirty. And you can see the row that we just added. We initialized all these variables with that event, which is allowing us to enter data in here. Alrighty. One last thing I like to add is a button to clear these fields out. I'm going to actually name this one. What just happened? Clear fields. And I'm going to change the style of this. Make it a little less pronounced. So the cool thing about the buttons, if you come up to behavior, and similarly on any other field, they'll have a behavior column. And when you click on any of the things within it, it'll auto-generate an event for you. So it's got the control, it's got the hook that I need. I don't have to do any of that. I am going to, however, rename it with a CE. So this is my prefix, stands for custom events. The reason I do that is because when you're looking through your events here, it's really hard to find them. There's one. Right, this sucks. But if I type CE underscore, there they all are. And the nice thing about, oh, I'm naughty. I left that open. So the nice thing about this being in its own thing and not in the onload event, yeah, see, this is bad. If I hit save change here, this is going to corrupt my button event. I know that I saved this already because we previewed it, so I'm going to hit no and ignore that. Take note of that, Tim. You have it on recording now. So to get to that, we can call event next and call our init fields. If you recall, that was just setting them all to their null values. We're going to do that again to clear it. When I preview, put some data in here. We hit clear, it all goes back to normal. Sweet, progress. All right. These fields are all well and good, but they don't currently do anything for this grid. It doesn't filter at the moment. So we got to add those filters in manually. So if we go to the properties of the grid, come down to data, grid model, all the way down to provider model, all the way down to the BAQ options, and finally the where list. This allows you to individually build out things that get appended to the REST call and filters it down based off of what we put in here. So this column name is going to be your BAQs column name. So in my instance, it's coming from the part-tran table, start date, which is sysdate, if I recall. These conditions, you type them in, they're not a drop-down, you just kind of have to know, but they are your standard greater than or equals for that they've got less than or equals. You can use the word like, I believe matches is one as well. But for the date, we're going to do greater than or equal. And then our key fields dot start date. This is where I said I don't have IntelliSense on this one, which is annoying. So the syntax here, these little curly braces mean that I want the data from this field. If I take those out, this is literally sending the value key fields, this word. I don't want that. I want the value within that data view. This question mark here, you can have one or two of them. One of them means that it needs data in this field in order for this to execute. If this field is null, this will not happen. I'm going to leave that as a single one because I don't want them dropping this down and running this wide open before they had a chance to put everything else in. You can also do two of them. This means that it will execute regardless if the field is null or not. So we're going to add the other side of that. Date less than or equal to key fields and date. We're going to add in the part num. And if I'm going to make a mistake, this is where it's going to happen because I have to type all this out. This one is a string, so it's going to be wrapped in single quotes. Again, you just kind of have to know this. And then I want to filter on the time as well. This time greater than or equals. And I'm going to do 2 for this one for the start time. The reason being is it considers 0 as the null value. So if I leave this at 0, which is essentially midnight as far as the seconds from midnight is concerned, the BAQ won't fire. And I don't want that because I want our users to be able to put in 0. Start time. Syntax matters. If that was to remain a lowercase t, that would have failed. The end date, however, I want as a single because I want to make sure that it does get restricted. So if I did everything correctly, I should be able to filter this BAQ based on these parameters up here. And I know I've got data here. We're going to leave it at midnight, 4:30:23, whatever time 80,000 is. Wah, wah. Oops. F12 opens your dev tools. We can figure out what's going wrong somewhere. Oh, part number's empty. Look at that data. See, the single quote work or a single question mark works. You got to fill in everything to make it work. Alrighty. So the fun part about what we've already done is it essentially, you don't really have to do anything for these. This is already taken care of. So if I grab this preview link up here, I'm going to pop this down here, and I'm going to grab the key fields from my demo earlier. I just do this in Notepad because it's easier to see than this URL bar up here. But when I paste this, you're going to see these 3 populate. These aren't going to do anything. It's going to refresh, and these are going to be blank because I don't have an event that calls the function quite yet. Boom. Look at that. That's cool, right? This happens automatically because those are bound to a field or a data view called key fields. This incidentally works in any other screen. So if you've got a link for, say, order entry, and you want to send somebody a specific order number, you can put keyfields.orderNum up here, the order number, and give them that link. When they paste that into their browser, it's going to open up that specific order. I know that's something we've been asking for a long time, and I'm happy to see it. All right.
By the way,
So now that
if you want to see the exact format of that, you can go into Kinetic and you can say to share the link, and it will show you what that link looks like after you're in order entry with. It actually shows what that format of that all is.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah. There's a share button on every screen, and so you can pull up an order, or pull up a part, and click the share, and then it will
Disappear. Well, that's not part of this one, so I'm going to ignore that for now.
Okay.
So now that we've got these populating through the magic of the URL, we need this to actually do something so that the rest of these populate so that this can now be filtered. So we need some events for that. And I'm going to call this start Zulu changed. This one is going to have a trigger because we're going to base it off of that field changing. So we're going to select data table. The hook is going to be column changed. This is going to be my key fields data view and start date Zulu for my column. So now we throw a message in here. Do a toast, info, hello world. Ooh, did you see that? I didn't change anything. Or did I? Remember that event on load? It's populating this as null, so that did actually change, which is not something we want to do. It's good that we see that though. We can verify that this event is calling at the right time. But we need a condition to exclude this from happening if it's blank. Properties. So in this expression field here, I'm going to take our field, key fields, start date Zulu. And I'm going to set this, make sure it's not equal to undefined, which is JavaScript's null, and it's not equal to an empty string. So now if we put our message in here, toast. You shouldn't see it when I load, but you should see it when I change data. So it didn't pop up. It's a good start. And now it does. Perfect. But I don't want this. This is the point at which I want to call our function and get that data back. This function has a super easy setup. And I put it in a library called helper funcs. This environment only has one, but I use this library to what Fred was talking about earlier for little widgets, quote unquote, that I use in App Studio. So like this convert to Zulu standard, I've got one for splitting a string, just small little things that App Studio doesn't really do. I compile that all into this helper funcs library. And if you recall from the signature, I've only got the one parameter in. Start date Zulu. And again, the curly braces because I want the value. And that is it for that function. I don't need any response parameters because I'm not putting it back to a data view. I am, however, going to do an on success and a row updates to update these remaining fields. So we've got our key fields dot start date. And then within this value, this is JSON, so it's always got to be in a string. No matter what the value is, it's always going to have double quotes. And when you run a function, it gets put into a data view called action result. This is kind of a temporary table for anything coming back from functions, and I think BAQ calls and ERP BO calls. This does get replaced. So if you make another function call afterwards, your data is going to get overwritten. So you want to make sure you do a row update immediately after you call your function so that you can utilize your data. Start time, same thing. And we've got our local start time, which is the out time string. All right, so the theory is, if I put in a Zulu date here, I should get these three variables back. What do we got? Where's one of these? 2023. Look at that. Start time is, I should have chosen the other one. That's got an actual time instead of midnight. There's a real time, so that you can verify that it works. So that's half the equation. We need to get the end date going now, which is just basically a duplication of this. The cool thing about this is we can copy it. Huzzah! Give it a rename. Oh, wait. Oh, gosh. That's fun. More little gremlins in the world of Kinetic. Yeah, I love that. So when this happens, I know that I saved it. I know this is not my event thing. The best thing to do, if I close this, it's going to try and do this. If you hit yes, it's going to save this. Just get out of it. Get out of everything. Abort, run away, and then go back in. We click it, everything's been restored, life is good again. So now if I copy this, that's better. We've got our full event. We just have to change the data to say end instead of start. Our parameter needs to be end. And our columns need to change to the end variation. All right. So again, if I did things right, I should be able to pop something into, oh, I didn't. I almost missed something. A trigger. End date. Now if I pop something in here, nothing happens. Let's see what I missed. End date Zulu. Is that the actual name of it? End date Zulu. End date Zulu. Oh, I'm hesitant to hit yes here. See, this is what I'm talking about. All right, now if we do it. See, Fred was smart. He did a demo with classic clients versus the Kinetic UI. But I fixed it. Everything comes in. These two things are working. So if I take the full preview now and pop this up here and hit enter, everything populates. Sweet. Now if I drop this down, we have a filtered data set. So that's still a little too clicky for me. I like to automate things a little more. So let's add an auto expand here when all of this data is populated. I'm going to close this so things don't happen. And we're going to call this auto expand, which is going to take a condition. We want to make sure that all of the fields are populated before we make it auto expand. Otherwise, bad news bears. So if the key fields dot start date Zulu not equal to undefined and start date Zulu is not equal to an empty string and end date Zulu is not equal to undefined and end date Zulu is not equal to empty string. And one more, we're going to do the part num is not equal to undefined or an empty string. So the theory behind this is I don't need to check all of these. It's under the assumption that If these 3 populates, the function is going to take care of the rest. So I'm only checking based on these 3 fields. And if that is true, we can use the property set widget, which takes a component ID. That ID for this grid is found right up here. So we're going to copy this and paste that right in there. We're going to come down to the properties and add a new one. And this property is called expanded. And we're going to give it a value of true. So note that I don't have a trigger on this. Nothing is going to happen yet. I'm going to throw this in the end date Zulu changed, because sequentially speaking, start and then end, and then it should go. I don't know if that theory is true, but it's what I'm going off of. So on the success of the row updates, we're going to do an event next, auto expand. So if we come into the preview, we paste this nasty link. Look at that, it pops right open. Very cool. I'm going to do one more thing though. When we clear this, I'd like this to go away, because if this is left open and the user starts typing data in here, it's going to do that unrestricted thing. Although not really, because I made it not do that with those single question marks. But it's still cool, so we're going to do that anyways. So in our clear fields event, we're going to add another property. That's not a component ID. And we're going to do the expanded again. But this time we're going to set it to false and save that. Pop that in there. It auto expands, auto runs. I hit clear fields. Everything shrinks back up. So now we have a nice working dashboard. We can publish this. And when we come back into our eMUG demo, we can see all of our changes that we made. We've got a nicer link that does not include all of this preview stuff. That's not going to work for a lot of people. We want our users to have the deployed version, much smaller, much prettier. This channel ID doesn't necessarily need to be a GUID. It needs to be unique in the sense that this is what's used to communicate between different tabs if that is being used. Doesn't really matter in this instance. So I'm just going to call it eMUG to make this a little more pretty. And then we take our parameters and we can give this link to any user to populate exactly the data we want them to see.
You can also set that channel just to be 0 if you want.
Yeah. As long as something is here, it doesn't really matter. So there we go. Questions, answers, concerns?
We do have a question from Nick. I think you may have already answered it. Can a condition be added to the detail panel to prevent it from being manually expanded without the parameters?
Yes, so it's got, on this panel here, under behavior, it's got these on panel card expand. You can put your condition here, and then if it fails that check, you can do an exits, or maybe it's cancel.
Can you even make the panel invisible unless it needs to be visible?
If you want to do that, yeah. So you could use a property set, or you could use a rule if you want to. If you add a data rule, you can add the action data view for key fields and check all of those conditions. And if one of them is false, aka it's not populated, you can set the action setting style as invisible, and this entire grid will just disappear.
Awesome. And then from Kevin, can you completely remove the channel ID from the URL, or do you have to have it in there, even if it's just 0?
You have to have something. You can't get rid of it.
Yeah, it was actually our developers thought you could, and then when I showed that you couldn't, they go, oh, well, it wasn't initially intended to be a required field, but it's required to say channel ID equals something. So, but it just can be channel ID equals 0. Or something, some value.
And from Tanner, are the layer names required in the URL?
Yes, they are. If you want to go to this one, if I take out, where's my layer name? My demo. Boop. Although if it takes the menu ID, yeah, it doesn't like it, partially because the menu that I deployed has that layer specified. So now it's confused because you're calling wherever the heck it is. That's interesting. Usually this should be DB 00001 or 5, whatever I called it.
All right. And Kevin, is there a way to convert a layer that you've been working on and convert it to a base layer?
I don't have an answer for that. You might be able to merge all these. Good question. I don't know. I can get back to you though.
Okay. Any other questions?
I guess I will say, if you want it to be the base layer, you could just edit this as base. Use base here. That's always an option too.
You can only do that if you have the SDK. The base layer cannot be edited unless you have the SDK license.
All right. No, I'm pretty sure we did this before we got the SDK.
Nope, we've always had it. Unless they added that as a new feature, which I don't think you need the SDK to edit the base layer.
Even for a custom app?
I assume so. I think because well, I don't know, for a custom. Actually, to make a custom app, then you need the new SDK too. I don't remember.
You do not. Nope.
But in the standard form, if you open any standard form, you don't get that option to edit base unless you have the SDK. I don't know for custom apps.
If you're creating a brand new dashboard, I think it does create it as a base layer.
Kevin says he's been able to edit custom dashboard apps from the base layer as well.
Gotcha. So it's for a custom. Okay, that makes sense.
All right. And one more. Do you have a resource for expressions and other things that you were showing us?
It's all JavaScript. So I guess you could Google JavaScript stuff. That's the syntax it's using anyways. Otherwise, epiusers.help is a great resource. I've got the better majority of all of this posted there somewhere. And if you're not familiar with epiusers, this is my rainbow theme. You don't have to look at that if you're not crazy. But I have this feature topic called the control compendium that goes through every single control that you've seen me place and how to use it and what the properties mean and what they do.
Awesome. Trying to get everything typed in for answers here along the way. Sorry. Anyone else? Any other questions for Hannah while we've got her? Hannah, are you able to stick around for the Stump the Chump?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay. So if we do end up with more, I have plenty of time. Okay, one more. Can you send me that link and I'll include that in the minutes, was the request.
Which link? Epiusers?
Yeah, the epiusers with your control compendium.
Oh, sure.
I'll get that and put it in the minutes for you, Kevin.